Hey everybody, welcome back to our channel. We're the Retired Renovators. We wanted to talk today about installing mini splits, specifically Mr. Cool. I think we have some experience now, don't we?
We have now done 4 installations.
What was the other thing I was going to say? Uh-oh. Yeah. Uh-oh.
And so we thought it would be helpful to talk about what we went through installing these units 4 times because you'd think after the 4th time we'd have this down pat, but we learned something every single time. And I'd say the main thing we learned is it's not nearly as easy as the instructions indicate that it would be. So we thought we'd talk about some of the specifics that we encountered.
Well, certainly the instructions more or less assume that the mini split head is going to be mounted on an outside wall that's only about 6 inches thick, and it's on the first floor, and you just go through a nice soft wood frame house insulation, and then you run the line set straight down to the ground and hook it up there. That is not our situation.
So, yeah, ours was a little
Ours
different.
is a little different for us. So we have 2 that are up on the 2nd floor, and all of the walls are, as we mentioned before, solid brick. The first floor is 3 widths wide, which is about 17 inches or so, and then the 2nd floor is 2 widths wide, which is still about 12 inches thick, just for the brick in the first layer. So it's a lot of drilling to get through all that stuff, and it's not always easy going when you're drilling a nearly 4-inch hole through a brick that is that thick. Other complications were, in one case, in 2 cases, we installed it on an inside wall, not an outside wall. So the inside wall, upstairs, we had a closet to go through after the inside wall and then out. And then downstairs, the wall we wanted it on was more toward the middle of the whole downstairs. It's a big open area. And we wanted the line set and the condenser to be way out on the outside on the side relative to where the head was. So that involves some extra engineering to get that done too.
One of the specific challenges we came into related to the inside walls is what to do with the condensate. So that's the little tube where the water goes out and has to go outside somewhere, and it goes just by gravity. So if your head for the unit is inside and you want the lines to be parallel for a while or horizontal for a while, the water's not going to run. And so we did all sorts of gymnastics dealing with trying to get that condensate in the different configurations to work out.
Right, because it is strictly gravity. It drips down. There's no pump that pumps it out. It's just water dripping down. And so you have to guide it to where it needs to go. And the choices are either outside, and when that works out, that's nice. But if you're in the interior wall or something else, you might need to route it into a drain of some sort in the lower level of the house, maybe a floor drain. Some houses have a floor drain, or in our case, it was a utility sink that we could run that line into. So you do have to be very cognizant when you plan that out about running that using gravity.
Yeah.
when hanging the head itself, there is a mounting plate that you fasten to the wall, and there are a lot of screw holes and a lot of choices. And they've got a couple of them marked there for, it says SU, but it means US, the 16 inches apart. And that would typically hit a stud. And you do want to really screw it into a stud if at all possible, not those little drywall anchor stuff. It's not going to hold. But the problem that we ran into is that if the wall is not perfectly flat, if it's got a little curve to it, especially if it bows out, then the head does not want to mount easily onto that plate because the wall is holding it out in the middle. And so you hook up one side, that goes great, and then you're trying to hook up the other side and it just won't go, and that's because the wall is holding it out. So that can be a bit of a problem. We've seen that happen a couple of times.
Yeah, and straight, and you might say, well, just make straight walls. Sure. Not always an easy thing to do when you're dealing with a 100-plus-year-old house. So some of the installations we had, very straight walls. The last one, there was a little bow that there was really nothing we could do about it.
Yeah. And what happens, too, is that there are these tabs on that plate that you clip into. And that plate is pretty thin metal. It's a bit flimsy. It's strong enough to hold it up, but it does bend easily. And so what I would recommend, what I've learned is that, yeah, put screws into where the studs are, but also try and get a screw near each one of those tabs so that they won't bend out easily. It's the whole plate. And we'll show you a picture of what that looks like when it bends out when you don't want it to.
Yeah, and speaking of that plate in the head, instruction videos that we watched before we did the installation, they all talk about this magic, it snaps right in, and we watch, these buff young people walk up ladders with it in one hand and just jam it on there. So none of that was our experience. It was awkward to carry. It took both of us. You hook it on. We didn't really hear the magic snap. It didn't seem necessarily as snug as we thought it was, and we finally had to just sort of have faith that it's hooked up correctly. And I think we finally did understand that it was hooked up correctly when we had to remove the original one that was defective and had to get a new unit. It was really hard to get it off the wall. So they are secure, but it just is not quite as simple as the instructions say about that.
Considering the position of the head, when you're choosing that in a room, what we've learned is that it's actually more important to worry about where the line set's going to feed most easily and where the condensate piping goes, and to put the head where that works out the easiest, rather than trying to get it, say, in the middle of the wall so it's even air distribution around the room or the house. Because we have found that even if it's in some little corner, the air gets all around. It really does mix up well. It circulates well, and in spite of where the head is located, it doesn't make much difference. A few feet this way or a few feet that way. It'll cool the room.
And this might seem like a little thing, but in the instructions, it gives you the list of all the things that it has and pictures and all that kind of thing. And one thing it says that is included is 4 rolls of this insulation tape that you wrap everything around. Now we have bought, well, we got one free. So 3 units we've purchased. We've had 4 units. In every single unit, there has been 2 rolls of this insulation tape, not 4 rolls. And you need 4 rolls. So
what you can do to kind of stretch out how much it covers is when you're wrapping around the line set bundle, just overlap each time around just half an inch or something rather than half of the width of the tape. Just enough to cover around. And the other thing is to wrap it very tightly. Whether or not you are short of tape or not, it does work out better. The tape holds better if you really snug it up tight when you wrap it around. And that will, of course, give you a little more length.
The line set comes wrapped in this vinyl vinyl sleeve, that has the two copper things in there, the line set things. But then you also have the electrical cord that is attached to the head and the beginning part of the condensate that is attached to the head. So you have to figure out what to do with that electrical cord, and the instructions are not clear about this. Some of the picture shows it inside the little plastic vinyl thing, some show it outside. We fished it inside for one of the installations. We wrapped it on the outside for another installation. But it's really cumbersome to figure out how to deal with this electrical cord.
What they should be doing is including the black, what they call signal cable, the electrical cable, should be in that sleeve along with the rest of the line set. The two copper pipes, there should be the black cable in there as well, with at the end then just a simple plug-in into the head unit, and that would save a whole lot of effort to have that already pre-bundled and ready to shove out. Because the electrical and the line sets have to end up at the condenser. It's not really a choice where you might send it one direction or the other. No, they all go right to the condenser, and they ought to all be in that same bundle. So with just a little quick connect into the head.
So also in the instructions, they talk about these sound insulating black pads, but the instructions talk about what's important about them is that they protect the connections from possible condensation as opposed to noise, as they're talking about the condensation. But they're not clear about whether it goes on both ends or not. And it seems like one is not quite enough for the grouping of the connections, and two is a little much. And we've gone back and forth, and I think we've done it both ways, one on each end. And this last one, we were doing two on one end and not one on the other, or we did one on the other. We had an extra one or something.
Yeah.
But it just would be nice if that were clear, because again, we've read these instructions a lot of times. We're pretty smart, and it seems confusing to us. It's not maybe super difficult to connect these
quick connects.
The quick connects, but I don't do that. Gary's doing that part. He's a lot more comfortable with that than I would be. But they talk about that it needs to be tightened. Too loose, it'll leak, but too tight, it will leak or it will break. And to me, it seems like you have to have some kind of experience with tightening things with wrenches to know what that torque would be and not be. And so take that pretty seriously, and I think maybe if you don't know, practice with something before you start messing with these lines.
You tighten it by hand. Very important to tighten by hand, because then you can feel if it's threading properly. If you just start with a wrench, you could strip the threads and then you're hosed, as it were. But tighten by hand. And I've always found that the two pieces come right down together as you're tightening, tight together before you feel any major resistance where you might use a torque wrench to find out how much it is. It bottoms out before you have to do anything with a torque wrench. So I just bottom it out, just snug but not really wrench it, because again you could strip it, and we haven't had any trouble in leakage with that. When you're first getting it going, 9 times out of 10, the tubing is not going to line up perfectly. It might be a little off like this, and you need it to be more lined up for the nuts to screw together. So give a little wiggle, try it. If it isn't lined up, bend a little bit here and there, and get it really straight to where it'll turn in easily by hand, and then finish it up with the wrench.
Right, and so the challenge of that, if you're doing that on this second story, which the last installation is what or did we bring it inside? We brought it inside because of that.
Yeah, if you're doing a second story, the choice is to get up on a really tall ladder, because a 6-foot step ladder is not going to get you to the second story to make this connection. So you have to do it on some big extension ladder of some sort, which is always, it's unstable to try, and you have to use 2 hands to do this, and you're supposed to have your feet and at least one hand holding on the ladder. So what we did to avoid that problem is to make the connection inside the room, nice and straight like this, made it all, and then fed it as a unit, the line set along with the head. As we mounted the head, we pushed the line set through the wall.
As you can see from the photos, it's kind of comical to do that because, again, in most of the installation videos, you're just taking that little piece of beginning of the condensate and the black core. You know, it's just a little stuff and just popping it a few inches through the hole. But you know, when you're dealing with these copper lines that you're not supposed to just willy-nilly bend, you're holding it up, and you have to do all this before you hook the head onto the wall. So it's a little bit of a comedy of errors, or you know, a little bit funny that you know, we did it.
In retrospect, a panel lift, which we have, a drywall lift, would have worked perfectly for this, installing the head, because you could put a little piece of plywood on the panel lift, flat, put the head on top of that, crank it up to exactly the height you want, roll it over toward the wall, and it would have been a lot easier.
Yeah, and so we have a video about the panel lift, a couple videos back. I'll put a link to it if you want to look at that to show other uses for the panel lift. It's not just for putting drywall up in the ceiling, and we used it to get drywall up into the second story. So we've been big fans of using the drywall lift for all sorts of different things. Did not occur to us for this, so instead we used the ladder, a bucket, a box, and that worked too.
It worked. It was a little more stressful. I would like to say a couple more things about that silly condensate plastic tubing. The connection that you make with the part that's hooked onto the head, it's just a friction fit that slides in there. And there's really nothing that stops it from just pulling right out. And it's easy to yank it out when you're twisting things around. So I would recommend putting at least some tape of some sort on that connection to hold that plastic tubing together. And the other thing you can use is some zip ties are very helpful in a Mr. Cool installation to hold the different lines together. And again, that condensate line needs to be at the bottom of the bundle as it's coming out the wall because of gravity. And so a zip tie is helpful to keep it in place like that. So I use several zip ties all the way down the whole bundle of line set and condensate to keep things organized, and very helpful.
Yeah. So our experience with Mr. Cool, more awkward than other video installations show, but you know, we're retired, we're old, we're doing the best that we can, and we think we've installed them really well, and most importantly, they look fantastic, they work really well, super happy with the product, and would do it again each time we learn a little bit more. So let me take a moment and invite you to subscribe to our channel. It doesn't cost you anything, it's free, and all it does is let us know that someone out there is watching or interested in our content, and it helps with the YouTube analytics a lot. So would appreciate it if you would hit the subscribe button and maybe even the like button and or the notification bell, and you'll be able to know when we get more content out. You got anything you want to say, Mr. Retired Renovator?
No one will call.
No.
No one will come to your door. Just subscribe.
Yeah, we're too tired to come to your door.
We have no one to come to your door.
So, All right, so that's it for us, and thanks for watching. Bye.